Okay, I'm going to give you a little background. You know it. A little background on me. I was born in Rhode Island. I have 8 siblings. I'm the oldest. 3 siblings died before birth. And it was a tragedy in our family each time one of the babies died. Unlike today, where people don't think that babies are human, so it's no big deal. Well, it is usually a big deal if the mom wants the baby, but in our culture, it depends on whether a child is wanted or not. But when I grew up, we had the least amount of children in my family. I had cousins, 10 cousins that lived right next door to me. And there were only 2 houses where we lived, and they were my cousins. There were 10 of them. And there were 6 of us. And then the rest of our family had 11, 12, 8, just tons of kids all the time. And each and every birth was a celebration and a joy. It was anticipated. Nobody could wait to hold the baby. And as we got older, there were a lot of older kids that could hold the baby, so we had to wait our turn. That was rough. So we just enjoyed the whole pregnancy and birthing of the babies and growing, taking care of them, changing their diapers, the whole 9 yards. All of us did. It was a huge, huge blessing in our family for another child to enter. But as I got older, things were changing unbeknownst to me, because I lived in a little town called Manville, Rhode Island. If you are driving through it and blink, you miss it. That's how little it was. It was very, very small. And the people that lived in Manville lived there their entire life, and their parents lived there before that, and their parents lived there before that. The house I grew up in was 200 years old in 1976. It had been put together, even in the roof, with not spikes, what do you call the pegs in the roof. And since then, my family added rooms and stuff, so it was really big. My grandparents lived with us. So I lived in a family with a mother, a father, a grandmother, and grandfather. So if you did something wrong, you had to face them all. And I did a lot wrong. I was facing them a lot. So, but it gave me a real sense of family, a real sense of what it should be and how it should work, and that comfort of knowing that you have a family that loves you no matter what you do. Because I did a lot of stuff I shouldn't have done, and they still love me. So, I was not saved until I was 20. Sorry, guys. These are my electrolytes. Sometimes I need them. I was 26 when I got saved. I think I was 26 in 1979. And at that point, when I was pregnant in 1972, there was all this discussion on the radio about how there was going to be an abortion amendment and abortion was going to be legal. And in my mind, I thought, well, that's not going to happen, I grew up in the Catholic Church, which was not the best place to learn about the Lord, but at least they were pro-life. I had no concept of people who would hurt a child, none. And so when it passed, it was 1973, and it was January of 1973, and I was pregnant with my first child. But I didn't know it then. I was pregnant 5 months before I could get a positive pregnancy test, and they wouldn't even see me for pregnancy until I got that test. So when I was 5 months pregnant, I got a positive pregnancy test. And they immediately, because I was going every month, I knew I was pregnant. I could feel the baby, but everyone said, no, it's just false, you're not pregnant. So when they told me I was pregnant at 5 months, I began to cry. And they pulled me in a back room. They said, come with us. And I went to the back room with them. I thought they just wanted me to calm down, you know. And they asked me, when would I like my abortion? And I said, well, you think I'm nuts? Do you think I'm nuts? I've been here every month testing for pregnancy because I want an abortion. I said, I want my baby. I just left there, never went back. I was so angry that they already had, were going to give me an abortion. So it was eye-opening for me. So I had my first child in 73, my second child in 74, and in 75, 76, I got saved. So I knew what I was supposed to do, is go to the abortion mill. And the abortion ministry back then was way different than what it is today. The whole church was on the street. The whole church. You'd go to an abortion mill and there were Christians out there saying, it's wrong, you can't kill your baby, there's never a reason to kill your baby. And then politics got involved. His name just went out of my head. Ralph Reed came along, and he was the head of the Christian Coalition, which developed out of nowhere. And what he was telling the church, the pastors, and everyone else was that all we need is one more pro-life Supreme Court judge. Well, we didn't have one pro-life Supreme Court judge then. They said it, but they never did anything to stop it. So we then became the haters. We were at the abortion clinics 5 days a week, 6 days a week if necessary, talking the women into keeping their children. Back then, we were saving about 6 to 9 babies a week because people had a soft heart. The girls going into the abortion clinic then had a softer heart. They had shame and guilt, and they had some dignity. And they were not like, to use the F-bomb back then in the late 70s, early 80s was really frowned on, especially if you were a woman. So we saved a lot of babies, but we fought the Christian Coalition constantly because they say, if you just vote for pro-life politicians, we'll beat this. And the church was dwindling because by then a lot of us had been arrested. We were getting arrested every day, every single day. I would get arrested in the morning at an abortion clinic, get out in time to pick my kids up at school, you know, so. And I would never told anybody what I was doing. So I was married then, and one day we were watching the news while we were eating, and I was seen walking across the TV screen in handcuffs. And my then husband just about choked to death. He said, "What did you do today?" I said, "Nothing." What I do every day, they just don't want me to do it anymore. Because the coalition, the Christian Coalition and the politicians realized you could make a lot of money off of telling Christians we can help you, and then taking them from God to the world, you know, this is what happened, and this is what I saw because I was there. The whole pro-life movement went from being on the streets, being persecuted. I mean, we were in jail, in and out of jail a lot, and they went from that to believing the politicians. And then it was rare to see a lot of Christians out anywhere, and the Christians that were out were being persecuted by other Christians. They would drive up to us and say, "You can't judge." Now we have to be, in the 80s they passed the FACE law, and so you couldn't be within 100 feet of a door. I used to be in the parking lots. I used to be able to go right to the car, and the girls never got out of the car, and they'd keep their babies. But now I had to be 100 feet away. So I had got a ladder, a big 10-foot ladder, and I'm up on the ladder, and I'm talking to the girls, and the Christians would drive up and say, God says, thou shalt not judge. I said, really? Yes, you can't judge. I said, I think you're judging me. It didn't even register with them what was going on. And you should not yell at them. I said, I can't. If I speak, they're not going to hear me. I have to raise my voice. And I don't have an offensive voice. I know, because I was a basketball coach, and my team couldn't hear me on the court. I had to make them look at me so they would know what I was saying. So my voice doesn't carry well, so it wasn't offensive. But I was being told, there were times where I said, if one more person drives up here and tells me I can't judge, I'm going to choke them. Because they're really pious coming by to tell you, I know what's in the Bible and you shouldn't be doing this, but they're not out helping in any way, shape, or form. So there was real contention between the people in the church that were on the streets and the people that were in the churches saying, just vote, just vote. So that is the history of the beginning of my my walk with the Lord and the pro-life history. And it was from the very beginning, almost the very beginning, there was a lot of persecution from the church, from the government, and just the world at large, because we were considered haters. So one of the things that the Christian Coalition did was teach the church that you can regulate sin. And that was heartbreaking to us, because when you're in sin, you repent. That means you stop, turn 180 degrees, go the other way. You're not going to sin anymore. And that concept disappeared with the pro-life. There's the pro-life ministry and there's the pro-life industry. The industry's making money, printing stuff, selling stuff, having conventions, selling tickets, raising money for politicians, from good-hearted Christians that don't understand what's going on. So we really, it was a heartbreaking time to see sin be regulated and the church go along with, well, if we make it so that they can't kill a baby once they can feel pain. God created us. He said, I knew you in Jeremiah 1:5, he says, I knew you in the womb before you were formed. And he doesn't mean before you were there. He just means before you were formed. Whether we were created in God's image, right? So what does it mean to be created in God's image? I'm going to go back to this, but I want to sidetrack. What does it mean to be created in God's image? What does it mean?
Qualities?
Oh, we have qualities like God?
Yeah.
That's some of it, but it's not what it means to be created in his image. In the Hebrew, the word in is the operative word. In can mean a lot of different things. It can mean, like, I put dishes in the dishwasher. That's location. I am in the retail business. That means that's who you are. You're a seller. You're a marketer. So in means a lot of different things. But when it comes to created in God's image, he created us. The word is not in, it's as his image on earth. This is before the fall. He created us as his image on earth. So and if we are his image, we are everything he is, and we're to project that to the world. And that's why children in the uterus are important, because equality, if you can earn his image, you can lose his image. But every single person was created in his image, even though we broke our original intention with Adam and Eve's fall. Now we have to be conformed to his image after we're saved. It's still our role to image Christ on earth and to get close to Christ. So every time we take a baby's life, we destroy the image of God because they're innocent, they haven't sinned. And we destroy family. It's just the whole breakdown. It breaks down family, society, government, everything. And because of it, children, because of the progression over the years, children have become commodities. They are commodities. We can form them in a petri dish and sell them. We can people kidnap them to use them for body parts. They are commodities. They have no worth because we don't know God. Our culture doesn't know God. We know God, of course, but our culture doesn't. So consciousness doesn't make you because we have consciousness doesn't make us the image of God. Because somebody in a coma doesn't lose his status as the image of God because he can't think. Sentience if you're sentient or not, does not destroy you as the image of God. We can pray, we can talk to God, but what if we have a brain injury? We can't pray. We're still the image. So, and that was one of the main reasons that the Christian church left the protection of the innocent, because, it's just four cells, a zygote that's attached to the wall. It's not a person yet. But at that moment of fertilization, not conception, and that's another misnomer, the church says a child is human at conception. But before conception is fertilization. And if you could see under a microscope what happens at fertilization, and they cannot explain this, they've tried, but it has not been scientifically correct. When the sperm meets the egg and is fertilized, there is a spark. There is that spark. Yeah, isn't it? It is. It's like the uterus, huh? It's like the uterus is God's creation workshop. He's there. He sees that fertilization action happening, and boom, he breathes life, just like he breathed it into Adam. He breathes it into that babe, not exactly the same way, but he's there, and he's putting, there's things in our body that we don't grow. We have a conscience, right? We have a conscience. Your conscience, before you're saved, tells you, I shouldn't have done that, After you get saved, it's like 10 times louder, whoa, I shouldn't have done that. I got to repent. I'm sorry, all of that. But it does not have an organ. There's no organ. It doesn't have atomic weight. It doesn't have any substance whatsoever. It's just information. By the way, no scientist in the world today can tell us how information got to our cells, how information, where it comes from, how it grows. They can't tell us anything about that. Well, I think I know. It's that spark when that baby is coming to life. So nothing that we do or we have or we gain or we lose can gain or lose the image. We were created as the image, and that's really important because it's at the crux of the whole pro-life movement. You have a question? You have a question? Oh. So it's at the crux of the whole pro-life movement, because I say, it's not a baby, it doesn't mean anything. Now, that was in the beginning, in like the 80s. Now, I don't care. I've had 5 abortions, and it doesn't bother me one little bit. I've had 5, and I'll have more. I'm proud of, now they shout their abortions. But that's just the progression of sin over the decades. So one of the things that the pro-life movement did for me in my walk with the Lord was teach me to love the unlovely. Because the girls that I worked with in the beginning were shy. They were broken. They were being forced to have abortions by families. That was very difficult to deal with. But as time went on, especially when the second generation abortions came around, they were on drugs. They were criminals. They were poor and irresponsible. Their children weren't disciplined. They were not disciplined. There have been babies that, I'll tell you about one. I had to meet with this woman in a restaurant. Someone asked me to meet with her, and I went. And she was pregnant. She already had 4 children. This was her 5th, and she was going to abort the baby. And when I got there, immediately I realized she's a gang member, really tough. For 3 hours, I talked to her. 3 hours, she brought her best arguments to the table. And 3 hours, I prayed quietly for about every word that came out of my mouth. And she, after 3 hours, said she would keep that baby. And I left there feeling like I had been in a prize fight and lost. I mean, I just felt completely and totally exhausted, beat up. And then the next 6 months commenced, and every 2 weeks I had to fight for that baby's life. Every 2 weeks she'd call and say, I can't do this, I'm not gonna do it, I can't pay my light bill. I'd pay the light bill. And I knew what she was doing. I knew if she wanted to, she's always paid her light bill, she could do it. But she just was manipulating me and using the baby to do it. So I could have hated her, been angry with her, but God taught me in my ministry to love the unlovely and just be there for her. Now, it went on all the way to the end, all the way to the end. The very end, she was putting the baby up for adoption. And in the past in Colorado, any girl, a woman, who put a child up for adoption, she didn't have to go through any screening. She didn't have to go through a background check, nothing. The baby went up and she was free. Now this girl has a record, a rap sheet. And right before the baby was due, the law went into effect that she had to be screened, and then that baby she was going to abort it. The late-term abortion is legal in Colorado all 9 months, and because she was not going through that screening, because there's stuff she's done that they could have found her. I found a lawyer that was able to bend the rules for her, and that baby was born. He's 12. His name is Jeremiah, and he was adopted by a wonderful Christian family. Now, she wanted to continue after the adoption with manipulating me. At that point, I had to be honest with her, and I said, I'd have done anything to keep that baby alive, but you've got to straighten out, And so we no longer have a relationship because she's never going to, in her mind, she's never going to straighten up. But there were enough seeds planted that I think someday she will be. But that's what it was like when you're on the street and you take these women. Sometimes I have 4 mothers at the same time. And in the early 2000s, there was a war in Liberia. And a lot of people were being killed. A lot of people were living in refugee camps, and the refugee camps would have lotteries and send them to the United States. And it wasn't called sanctuary cities then because they were coming in legally, was Denver. So I had a lot of women who were from Liberia that were going to abortion clinics because they were afraid to be pregnant here. They were afraid they'd lose. They won the lottery at the refugee camp to come, and they were afraid they were going to be sent back. So I was getting those women and fighting for them to stay, and it's a lot of responsibility. But you have met one of the products of that, and that's Emmanuel. You've met him at church. He's a wonderful young man in Isaiah. That's where they came from, Iberia. So, life is sacred, but it's almost impossible. I shouldn't say that, impossible, but it's very, very difficult to get that across to the general public because we have become so selfish, so selfish. You know, we have those commercials that say, you know, the L'Oreal hair dye commercials, that you deserve this. You need it because you deserve it. Well, what do we deserve? We don't deserve anything, and must be grateful for the salvation that we got because we didn't deserve it. So I want to go through I want to continue now going through some of the misconceptions that the church has passed on as reality, okay? Because the church is regulating sin, it no longer has to face the persecution that it would have had to face if it would have said, no, all abortion is wrong. And what we would like to see, and it's not because I'm mean, but it's because it's the way that God made things. He said, thou shalt not murder. And if you spend men's blood, by men's blood, so shall you die, right? So if a woman is going to murder her child or has murdered her child, we would like her to be prosecuted the same way the murderer was. And not because we think she's so rotten. We don't want to leave her without the truth. We don't want to leave her without discipleship. But if it's okay, if you really believe it's murder, treat it like murder. Because that's when people will stop, if there's a price to pay for killing your own child. But the church went along with regulation. The church said, we just need more time. We just need more judges. We just need more politicians. And I don't know if any of you know who James Dobson is. I don't know if I should be dropping names, but James Dobson had a focus on the family. He was like, do you guys recognize the name? You do, okay. Well, he was like the Pope of the Protestants. Everything, he wrote books on how to raise your family. He did wonderful work. But he always was for voting for the politicians. Vote right, never get out in the streets, stop it, because we were being arrested. We were the mud on the feet of the pro-life movement, you know, because we had been to jail and because we yell and because we ask for things that are not palatable, you know, for punishments and things. He would not go there, and nor would he even preach about it being wrong to that depth. So he had a video in Focus on the Family is a place also. It's not just the name of an organization. There's a place in Colorado Springs called Focus on the Family, and you can go there and take a tour through all their buildings. And as you walk in, there's a speech of James Dobson saying, I will not vote for another politician that would not vote pro-life or not speak up for the children, something like that. And I was shocked when I saw that because he did it all the time. So my pastor went, and sure enough, that's what he saw. So we wrote a letter to him. First, we tried to call and talk to him, and he wouldn't take our calls. But we were also very well known by then because we were always getting arrested, and it was always, you know, bad press. And so we wrote a letter to him, and he wouldn't answer. So we know where he lives, and we knew what newspaper he got because it's the only one in his area. And we saved up enough money, and we took out a full-page ad in the newspaper and asked him to please stand with God and not with politicians. And that made him even angrier. So we went to see him personally at his office. And when we walked in the office, we asked to see him. We sat down. The security guards came. The police came. And I was outside at that point. But my husband and my pastor and several other people were inside waiting to talk. Just men were waiting to talk to him. And they were all arrested. They went to jail. And 2 weeks later, the homosexuals were outside because he said homosexuality was wrong, but he was okay with civil unions. So they were outside protesting because they wanted him to say it wasn't wrong. He invited the whole group in and fed them and talked to them. But us, his brothers and sisters, would have nothing to do with us. So the disparity was mind-boggling and frustrating because you would think your own people will help you, but they don't. The church itself, just the everyday pastors, they would not risk even speaking about abortion because they lose some of their congregation, because by then, in the late 80s, early 90s, abortion had become so popular that there were women in church that had abortions and they didn't want to hurt their feelings. So the churches stopped talking about abortion. And at that same time, Satan is so cunning. At that same time, all you ever heard is that Christians can't judge. Do you remember a time when, you guys are pretty young, but don't judge. If you judge, you're a judgmental Christian. You can't judge. And that, and the fact that they didn't want to talk about it in church, just kind of went hand in hand and gave them permission not to talk about it in church. So, and that's when the church all turned to politicians. All you need is a politician. You don't need the gospel. The gospel is what will change the hearts of America, not politicians. And we were always we're there at the abortion clinic. Someone would say, they would drive up and I'd be on a ladder talking to somebody and they'd say, "You're not giving them the gospel. You're not giving them," "No, I'm begging for the life of this child." I said, "How many people have you led to the Lord in 15 to 30 seconds? And they would say, "Well, no." I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to give them the gospel. This child's life is in the balance here. Once I talk her into coming out, then I can work on getting her saved. But this is not a gospel moment. The moment is to stop the murder and then get it." And they just thought it was just terrible. One of the things they would say, "But you're yelling at them," and especially young kids that would come by with Christian schools to criticize us. That was just amazing when they would take a field trip to tell us we were wrong. So one of the things I would tell the kids, okay, they're high school age. Suppose you just met your favorite girlfriend, your favorite boyfriend, and you're going on a date, and your dad has a new car and he's letting you take it. And you take that new car to a really nice restaurant, and your dad warns you, "Don't you damage this car. I'll let you do it, but if anything happens..." So you park the car where you can see it from the window where you're going to sit in the restaurant and make sure it's going to be okay while you're eating. And then you see somebody keying your car and trying to poke the tire. Are you going to get out your guitar and sing to them while they're doing that? And they'll go, "No, well, that's a car. This is a baby. This is a baby. You want to play your guitar now?" You've got to speak for the voiceless. And so we would have those conversations day in and day out with all kinds of young people, all kinds of older people. It was very difficult to hold God's standard in front of the church. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to see it. They didn't want anything to do with it. Because the media, the news, the preachers, everybody was telling them something different from us, so that we had to be wrong. And the church is not reading their Bible. They're not reading it. If they read it, they would know God didn't say don't judge. He says judge righteously.